Okay. Okay. Ready to get started. I want to thank you all for coming today. This is the final installment for this semester of the Professional Development Series here at Florida A&M, Florida State University College of Engineering. And in this final panel discussion, we will be talking about going from grad school to work, how to get your dream job with your PhD. And I have some excellent panel members who have done that and more. We have Dr. John Davis here. I'm going to let each one of them introduce themselves after I just say their names. Dr. Maisha Gray-Diggs. And I'm expecting to have Dr. Edmond Du Pont come online in a little bit also. And so I just want to go ahead and get started by having each of you introduce yourselves. Just tell us where you got your degrees, what you are doing now, and maybe some interesting thing, maybe something you'd like to do, a hobby or something, just to get us introduced. John, you want to go first?
Sure, happy to. Again, my name is John Davis. I know Professor Moore from Howard University. We were actually knew each other since freshman year, but also were roommates our last year. At Howard, I studied electrical engineering. I then went to UC Berkeley to earn my PhD, and there also studied electrical engineering as well. In terms of my career trajectory, my first job was at IBM Research in New York. I then, with a fellow Howard, I took some time to try our hand at a startup. We bootstrapped a startup, learned a whole lot. I'm not a billionaire, but it was a great experience. And we actually had a nice engagement with the New York Times where they utilized our technology. I also then worked at the RAND Corporation. That was my next kind of big job since IBM. And that was technology policy. And I now have been at Google for 3 years. I'm out here in the Bay Area. And here I do what's called privacy engineering. So that's looking at all of the data that Google manages and we make sure that it follows respect for user privacy, both in terms of governance implementations as well as policies that we want to make sure we adhere to. In terms of hobbies, I'd say one of my favorite things to do is skiing. In fact, I was just looking last night into buying some early tickets to do skiing this coming season. I've been skiing only one time in the past 2 years due to COVID. So I want to increase that as we get back. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Maisha.
So good morning. I see John and I are both on the Pacific Standard Time. I see the Golden Gate Bridge. So I'm excited to be here with you all today. And like John, I went to graduate school with both Dr. Moores, Dr. Carl Moore and Dr. Melody Moore. They were older graduate students than me. I was the first babysitter for their oldest daughter. And so that tells you we go back, although I don't look old enough to be anybody's first babysitter who's a college student. So I'm gonna own that. But I have an undergrad degree from MIT in material science and engineering, and I have my PhD in material science and engineering from Northwestern. Have a specialization in polymer chemistry, physics, and engineering. Still dabble in that as my children are California tree huggers. Left graduate school and did 13 years in CPG. So I worked 11 at Procter & Gamble in diapers and beauty care. I worked 2 at Clorox. When I came back to the Bay Area in 2015, I worked in cat litter and charcoal. And then in 2017, I made a complete full-time pivot to talent acquisition. So I went to Microsoft here in the Bay Area to lead their talent acquisition efforts in a region where we compete with the big fish who actually have headquarters here, like the Googles, like the Facebooks, because as you know, Microsoft is headquartered in Redmond, Seattle, Washington area. Left Microsoft and then led talent acquisition at Twitter. So if you are a Twitter user, you know, today the platform is buzzing with all the Elon Musk news. And so really helping to build the people to do the next generation stuff, you know, built the team that took on Clubhouse to create Twitter Spaces. And then now I am at Eventbrite as the Vice President of Talent Acquisition and helping them get better at this, really build a TA machine. But really where I bring and my passion to this work is that my job is to diversify tech. So when people come and get me to do this work, they have to be really serious for me about wanting their organization not to look like we know startups and tech to look. So if you're not true to this work about diversifying your workforce, you probably don't want to come and ask me to join your team. So excited to be here and answer any question that you have. I'm pretty transparent, as Dr. Moore will tell you. So in this safe space with family, I'm happy to answer whatever questions you have.
Thank you so much, you all. Actually, you know what, Doctor, I want to call you Maisha. Is that, I mean, I don't want to be too informal, but I'm so used to you guys. So Maisha, let me start by kind of piggybacking on what you just mentioned in terms of diversity. We know that's very important. And what can you say in terms of being an underrepresented person in your field? If we were to give the students some advice, not just in terms of the hiring process or looking for a position, right? But also being at a company in tech. What can you say about that? How has it influenced you?
You know, I would say that for you all as students, I know that you are leaving the academy and want to make money, right? And so it's very easy with that mindset of, I'm going to make 3 to 4 times more than I was making, if not more than that, as a graduate student. Sometimes it is easy not to go into this hiring process, interviewing the company. But I will tell you that you need to go into this process, interviewing the company, right? You will spend a lot of hours just like you do in your lab work with your research group. I hope some of you interviewed your advisor. You have to interview these companies, right? There's a lot of stuff that, we pay a lot of marketing firms a lot of money to spin and sell stories. And so you have to think about, can I see myself there, right? And I know that's hard to do sometimes when you're like, I need money. I need to be out. Your advisor may be helping push you out fast. But I would encourage you to take the time to think about what I call your desired employee experience, right? So companies will give you and talk about their employer brand. And we talk internally about what is our value proposition to you as candidates. But when I talk to candidates on the flip side, especially underrepresented candidates, I need you to think about what is important to you and what you're looking for in your criteria, right? What is your interview checklist? What are the competencies that you want this company to have, this hiring manager to have, and be okay with walking away? Like if your desired employee experience cannot be met, then you need to be okay with walking away. And that's easy for me to say, like John, we've been away, we've made a little money and we have a little money. And so I understand that you could be saying, you are operating from a place of privilege, Dr. Gray Diggs. But I say that because you all as underrepresented candidates are highly coveted. Everybody has put their diversity goals out. Everybody wants a diverse candidate. And so you do have a little more bargaining power than you think.
Good point. John, what do you want to add?
I think those are great points, Dr. Gray Diggs. I would say that one of the main things you need to do is be intentional. I would even widen it a bit more. So it's not just be intentional about your company, but just be intentional about what you want, with your PhD. And for those of you who are still early in the graduate school process, be intentional about what you want in terms of, do you want to get a PhD and how you'll use it? I think that when I look at my career, I'm very happy that I have a PhD. There are a couple of things that I still benefit from. One of the things is that I'm a good writer, and you're kind of forced to become a good writer. That's not the only way to become a good writer. There are lots of people that are good writers who don't have PhDs, but through a PhD process, there is a degree of emphasis on that because you're publishing papers, you're publishing your dissertation. In fact, I was talking just the other week to another person that Dr. Moore knows. I'll say these official titles for another minute or two, then I'm gonna switch into informal mode.
No problem at all.
But Dr. Moore knows another fellow PhD, Dr. Adrian Isles, who followed a similar path to me. By the way, I might occasionally, the light goes off where I'm in this Google room and the lights turn off if there's no movement after a certain bit of time. So if you see me moving, waving my hands, that's what I'm doing. But we were just in a conversation about 2 weeks ago. Adrian Isles and I had a very similar path, both undergrad at Howard, both PhDs at Berkeley. And we were talking about how in some cases, they're engineers that are not good writers. And through our process, we became very good writers. So I thought that was very important. The other thing is I really just became comfortable with being able to learn whatever I want to learn. Like there's nothing that's going to intimidate me. If I need to pick up a book, pick up a set of articles, I can accomplish that. So those are things that I think are really, really valuable. But the one thing I would say is to make sure you are intentional about what you plan on doing with this terminal degree. And I know when I started, I didn't really have that fully mapped out. So like, is your goal to be a researcher? Okay, that's a very good use of a PhD. Is your goal to become a faculty member? That's a very good use. I had a conversation with someone about a year ago, and they said, hey, they wanted to get a PhD in electrical engineering because they like electrical engineering. And it was unclear to me. I posed like, well, what are you going to, what exactly do you want to do with this degree? Like, how are you going to employ it? And they really couldn't answer that. And I said, this is a long process. You want to be intentional if you're going to be engaging in such a significant process. You need to be 100% clear on how you'll take advantage of it, of the degree once you have it. The one other thing that I want to make sure I mention, I don't want to let this be left out. There is a book that I read towards the end of my doctoral degree that you should, it's out of print, but you should be able to get it on Amazon. Some of the material will be dated, but overall, I think it's valuable. It's called Getting What You Came For, The Smart Student's Guide to Graduate School Success, I believe. It is an excellent book, Getting What You Came For, and it really kind of maps out all of the various ups and downs and the navigation process of a doctoral degree. I highly recommend that.
That sounds great, John. We will, well, maybe somebody can, if somebody does not, I will plop that into the chat, that book. So great suggestion there. And so, yeah, so that's good information, John. And I think that it's important that people understand and the students understand that there's multiple ways to get from here to there. And knowing what you want to do with that PhD is important. I think especially because what you find in a lot of graduate students is that they are good students and they were good undergraduate students. So continuing in terms of education is not something that seems far out to them or something that's extremely difficult for them. They've always been great students. But it's important to know what you're in school for. And if you can get a grasp on exactly what you're looking forward to, that'll help you decide, do you want to go all the way to the PhD? Do you want a postdoc? Do you want to go in academia? Do you want to stop at a master's? And so these are important considerations. Dr. Gray Diggs put in the chat, PhDs can learn a lot of things quickly. Balance for me as a hiring leader is whether we have time to wait for you to learn or whether we need a skill set now. Just something to think about how the other side is thinking about this. Companies are in the business of making money. Yeah, I get a lot of PhDs that apply for roles and they're very frustrated that we haven't chosen them. And it's like, wearing your hiring manager hat, you have deliverables and you have to make money. Like
Google isn't here just to do good work. We are here to make money. And so the longer that I have this opening, or the longer that it takes for you to onboard and ramp, we're not making the money, I'm not meeting the deliverables, right? So that we as business leaders and hiring leaders are balancing, how long can I wait for you to get up to speed? Is this one that I have time? Is this some long-term area I'm investing in for now? You know, we're making all these decisions. And so I just don't want PhDs to be applying like all over the place and not understanding the business side of this. We are still running a business as we hire, right? So I get frustration from graduate students a lot about that. Like, I can learn anything. Appreciate that. But I have deliverables. I got to make Twitter, Eventbrite, Microsoft, Google, all these people money. We have to balance. Or we have deliverables. I know Dr. Du Pont is here, to whomever funding agency is looking for an update on whatever timeline. I need results. So that's
Understood.
what I just want to manage with them.
Thank you. Thank you. And anybody who's in the audience here, please, if you have a question, you can post in the chat, or you can just put up a hand, or just speak out, and we'll take that as we go through. Don't want to hold those to the end. We do have Dr. Du Pont that joined us. Edmond, I'm going to let you go ahead and quickly introduce yourself. Just tell us, you know, who you are and where you got your degrees and what you're up to now. And the question that was on the floor is how does being an underrepresented person in your field, how does that impact you, and maybe how does that impact your job search? I think you're muted, sir. Let me see. Still can't hear you. Not sure. See, Dr. Gray Diggs, we're not all Zoom experts, right? You would think after the pandemic, we're all experts.
It's too much, too many tools.
Uh-huh.
Somebody tried to bring WebEx. I was like, WebEx still is alive? I'm like, oh.
Right. So, Edmond, only thing I can suggest is maybe if you log out and come back in, maybe it will correct itself and we'll see how it works. But I have a list of questions, if there's none on the floor, that I can proceed through. So let me go ahead and get started, and hopefully Dr. Du Pont will be able to come back. Are there careers that engineering PhDs don't often consider but should be considering as they come out of their school? And really what I'm getting to, guys, there is, I think if I'm gonna use myself as an example. When I came out, I was looking mostly at the big firms. I didn't really, John had worked at IBM, I knew that. My father was an IBMer. So I was looking at the big companies, and that was pretty much all I was looking at. So what I want to get from you guys is there something else students should be thinking about?
Well, I can certainly cover a range of some of the companies and types of companies that I'm aware of. So obviously there are the research institutions, that the institutions that were big when I was coming out have now shifted. So you can still go to IBM research, but that's not going to be as sexy as it may have been, you know, at this point, 20 years ago. Bell Labs used to be big. Again, that's not quite as sexy, but there obviously are new research opportunities. So Google has a tremendous research organization. You know, all the other big FANG companies have research organizations. Another opportunity is obviously there are faculty roles. I'll be honest with you, when I was coming out, I kind of had a sense of, you know what, I've been jumping through so many hoops in the PhD program, and I didn't want to jump through the hoop of tenure. And you know, when I look back on it, maybe I should have given that a try. I do enjoy teaching and working with students, so that could have been interesting. And I have several friends. Well, obviously there's Dr. Moore, but also other people from Berkeley that did go that route. There are the big consulting firms. they are hiring PhDs. So McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group, several other consulting firms, that's a big opportunity. Then you have the firms like D.E. Shaw that are, kind of in doing this financial wizardry where they want to have data scientists, for example. And that can be, good opportunity, also can be quite lucrative. And then also, I just mentioned that I worked at RAND. That's a policy entity. So RAND, along with New America Foundation and lots of other companies like that, are hiring droves of PhDs. And I'll just kind of mention one thing that I think is kind of interesting is if you look at kind of these range of opportunities, in some places, your PhD will be recognized in different ways at different places. What do I mean by that? So at Google, I'm not typically called Dr. Davis. There are some special scenarios where I'm called Dr. Davis, but that's very rare. And my sense is that the other FANG companies, that tends to be the case. At RAND, I often was called Dr. Davis. Part of it is, how much is your role inward facing versus outward facing? At RAND, there was a lot of outward facing. We were interacting with the federal government and our other clients. And so they often had a need to kind of like say, hey, we have these really smart people on our team. Whereas at Google, my job is mostly inward facing. So, that it's a personal decision of whether that matters. Certainly at Google, if you overemphasize, like if I insisted that people call me Dr. Davis, it would be weird. This comes back to what your intentions are. If your goal is, I want people to, I want respect, slam my fist on the table, that's a valid goal. But certainly at Google, I can definitely speak for Google, and I'm pretty sure this is representative of I know people at Apple and Facebook and so forth. That comes into play. So I think it's important to kind of mention that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so I'm trying to jump in. So thank you. I apologize for the lateness and the technical difficulties, but I'm kind of happy to be here. So yes, I'm Edmond Du Pont. I graduated from Florida A&M undergrad, master's, and PhD. I currently am here in San Antonio, Texas, working for Southwest Research Institute. So since being I've been here 13, 14 years now. So my background, all my degrees are in electrical engineering. Since working here, it's grown from robotics for military vehicles, which is kind of what I did my dissertation work on, to commercial vehicles. And now more recently, it's spread to agricultural vehicles. So you think about just general robotics in the space and how it's grown. We've done a lot of work in computer vision, AI, and so I'm leading more of the agricultural. And so kind of piggybacking off what Dr. Davis said, I was smiling because the formalities of a PhD, even for us as a research institute, we have engineers and scientists from all academic levels. And so we don't have the formalities of doctor here, only when it's, like you said, outward facing. We have our clients come in and we want to, show that level of formality. We use doctor, and it kind of catches you sometimes because, my managers, they all call me Ed or Edmond or whatnot. But when we're in that room, then it's Dr. Du Pont, and then you kind of look and it just catch you off guard. But, it's a form of respect. And so me being a minority, I wanted to touch on that as well, has been pretty nice. I think being here at Southwest Research, they're in Texas, there's not a large minority population at this company. It's growing, and especially advanced degrees. There are very few of us. and we actually get together every now and then and talk about it. But there is a sense of expectation that they tend to.
Well, all right, we've had some technical difficulties.
Carl, if you want, since he dropped out, I can just add an interesting kind of a funny anecdote. So
Go ahead.
there was when I worked at Rand, we would kind of like declare, you know, doctor, but then once you like, it would be on our, often we would send a read ahead material or whatever, and it would say doctor this, doctor that, you know, like maybe if we're sending a team of 6 people, like 4 of them all have PhDs. There's this one guy who was a government employee who had a PhD, and other government employees have PhDs too. So it's like our 6 meeting their 5 or whatever. And this guy, he did not let anyone know his first name, and he declared, like he insisted, you were going to call me doctor. His name was Dr. Jones. And like, you didn't know his first name. So like, I guess his mom named him doctor. And so we would kind of chuckle, like, what is the big deal? Like, what, you know, like it just, he would not, unless you called him Jones. So he kind of, I felt that to me kind of reflected poorly on this person. And so I do think, and let's, I want to dive a little bit deeper. You know, in a Black context, I think, again, I think you should be thoughtful. Like, you own this, and you don't have to, like, you know, always, you know, insist, you know, you will submit and call me doctor. So
yeah, that's understandable.
I think there's a way to subtly let people know, but not necessarily put it in their face.
Right, because your work's going to speak for itself. Dr. Du Pont, did you want to conclude? I know you were right in the middle of talking. We had some kind of technical issue. Oh, now he's on mute. We may have the same situation we had previously.
All right, how's that?
That's good. I can hear you fine.
All right, yeah. So I think the biggest thing was, I don't think it's a harsh expectation. I think for working here specifically, you know, just having a PhD, there's a certain level of expectation to have innovation, creative ideas, and kind of self-driven to that aspect. But you know, you're often put in situations like, especially with me, as I transition to agriculture, that's, you know, another area where there aren't a lot of minorities in that space. But and so going to conferences, meeting with clients, all of those type of things. You know, I've been to Iowa, you know, in the countries of Iowa, talking with clients and trying to get things going. But there's still, I haven't felt anything. I think there's always been an acceptance and, you know, just a business as usual kind of approach that I've experienced. And so that in itself has been rewarding and not been an issue that I've faced.
That's great to hear. That's great. Okay, I have another question for you all. How important is negotiation to a good starting salary? And if so, is there any kind of advice you can provide for how students should go about that as they are interviewing for positions?
Absolutely do it, right? We know that the pay transparency situation isn't where we want it to be. We know that the pay gap exists because we don't know what we don't know. And you won't always get good recruiters, or you won't always have people like me who will send an offer right on back. I'm dealing with one now that I have challenged them that we are paying a majority man. Why? And I haven't seen a diverse candidate come through. So you don't always have that advocacy on the inside. Mm-hmm. And so you have to negotiate something. I mean, like, we tend to be so happy as persons of color and women to get these offers because the numbers are bigger than what you're used to seeing as a graduate student. And we jump too fast. And once you say yes, then they're not, you lose your negotiating power. So, you know, I challenge you all to get the offers, thank them for their time. Don't let a recruiter rush you, because that's what I train them to do, is to rush you and get you to make a quick decision under stress and duress. And stand your ground and seek to understand, right? There are tons of salary surveys external you can compare and benchmark. You all are the generation where people share salary much more freely than our generation did. You know, mama and them, that, you know, some of this cultural archetype stuff that we have, we didn't talk about salary, you know, we didn't talk about money, and people do that more freely. And I would challenge you to negotiate a bunch of stuff. I think everything's on the table. I have an executive coach. I have, you know, programs. I'm doing extra weeks of vacation for candidates. So I say you have to do it. Now, the how, I find that we're not always comfortable. And some of this is cultural stuff we bring from our grandmothers and them when we talk about money, but we have to do it. And so I have a number of resources of African-American women who have kind of made it their mission to help our folks negotiate. Happy to share, happy to get some coaches, but you just have to do it. I don't care how uncomfortable you are. You must get your money.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I would also add know your worth, because depending on what your specialty is, especially as a PhD, it also has an added value. If it's a, like, if for those who know what machine learning AI, you know, it's a hot topic right now. A lot of people are doing it. And so that adds an actual value when it comes to negotiating your salary. And so those are things you also need to think about. You know, is the area that I'm pursuing, that I'm looking for a career or position in, you know, is it flooded, you know, or is there slim pickings that I may have a little bit more worth, you know, going to one area or going to one company versus another. The other thing, in addition to your salary, are, you know, which I didn't think about as much when I was just coming out of PhD, but the benefits, you know, those are things that vary between certain companies. And so those are things you also need to look at, what things are available, either if you don't have a family or if you do have a family, you know, how does that factor into that salary value as well. And so I would, from a personal note, when I first started working here, you know, I was undervalued. You know, my starting salary was, and I didn't know it until 5 years after being here. It was a point of me going from, I was working in one group and my research didn't fit that group. I actually transferred to another group, which was more robotics focused, and talking with the vice president at that time, after about a year of working here, they increased my salary because, you know, I was at a lower bar based on my qualifications and the years I've spent here so far. And so that was kind of an eye-opening experience to know that one group put my value here where this other group had me a lot higher. And so that was welcome.
Good point.
Yeah.
John, before I come to you, I have a question from Brianna Wiley. Brianna, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, hold on, I'm trying to, okay, lowering my hand. So when you're talking about negotiating power, one of the things that I've been really interested in, but don't really know how to navigate is like having more of remote work than like, I don't know, in-person work, because I've kind of gotten used to that as a student, and most of my research revolves around doing things like over code. And so I don't know like how like available those options for working are, like whenever you actually go into industry, or if you know of people who have like negotiated having more of a like hands off, not going into office every day type of job situation.
Well, given that some of the companies are requiring people to come back, I think this is one of those flexibility benefits, as Dr. Du Pont talked about, that you have to decide, right? Like Apple, Google, some others have decided that they want people back in the office a certain number of days a week, and you have to comply. But there are a bunch of other companies that will let you sit at home and code, who believe that what we demonstrated over the last 2 years is the future of work. And you can do it. I think, again, for me, that goes back to what your desired employee experience is. So if remote work is at the top of that for you, then you will be able to find a company that will value your PhD and you'll get to work at home. I'm going into the office 1 to 2 days a week, because some of our big meetings just work better in person. 3-hour trainings I'm finding are getting harder for me to do at home. And so I've made the choice. No one's told me I have to go back into the office. I just go in. So I think you can get it done, Brianna, if that's what's important to you.
John?
Let's see. Just in responding to Brianna, I think there are lots of companies these days that are offering remote only positions. There are companies that are, literally, they don't even really have an office anymore. So I think there are lots of opportunities out there. Having said that, I would be very thoughtful about being remote, especially if you are at a company like Google, where there are a significant number of employees that will be in the office. And I say this especially as a new grad. There is, a degree of camaraderie. I've been coming in the office. Google just kind of officially reopened last week. I've been coming in a couple times a week for the past month. And some of the serendipity, bumping into people in the hall, so on and so forth, that still does have value. If you started a company, maybe work in the office for some number of days, say for a year or 2 or 3, and then after you've established relationships, you go remote, that could have a significant impact on your trajectory at the company. So again, if it's super important, you need to be in Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and your family's there, do what works for you, but also be thoughtful of how it may impact your career trajectory.
I challenge that a bit, and this is me wearing the HR hat and having spent a lot of time really working with other remote thought leaders. This is a very Google-centric view that I think you're bringing, Dr. Davis. We have to figure out as a company, as a world, how to do remote better, right? And so yes, there are companies where your career trajectory could be limited, but I would argue that they just need to do better and get on the bus. They need to figure out how to have those water cooler conversations in a different way, because the world is changing. Yes, Google is a big player. They're going to pay you nicely. But again, I think we are seeing, as those of us who study in this space and are practitioners, that the world is changing and that we have to adapt and continue to adapt. And I think, again, remote first is now becoming almost table stakes, right? Okay. So I think it's unfair, especially for, I'm assuming, Brianna, with the name Brianna, that you are a female candidate going into market. I would challenge my hiring leaders and the leaders that you need to figure it out. You need to figure out how we don't lose female or diverse talent because they need a remote situation. Like it is a both and. I will say we're not there, but we have to get there. And there are a lot of us who are working and studying and playing in this space who bring these PhD type data skills, because I don't think typical and standard HR backgrounds are going to solve this problem, but I do think we'll get there. And so I struggle with just telling her and letting her leave today thinking her career trajectory will be limited. I think it's depending on the company and where they are on their future of work, remote first journey.
Well, let me do a tangent.
Right. So let me just
go ahead, John.
I want to clarify. So I said be thoughtful. And what I mean by that is think about where you're going. I know someone who just went to Coinbase. Coinbase very much has a process of, we are 100% remote. I know several other companies that are like that. In all that you do, be thoughtful. Like, you need to be thinking about it. What is the scenario in this company? What's the scenario in that company? So yes, Brianna, I'm not saying that, across the spectrum, your career trajectory will be stunted. I'm not saying that. But I do think that there are companies where you will have some impediments if you just blindly take the remote option. Just to be, again, at some companies, there are impacts on your pay, like very real, tens of percentage points impacts on your pay. So again, I think depending on where you are in your career, what you want, make the decision that works for you, but don't go in not aware of the impact.
And this is a very an idea or a situation which is much more in the forefront now. It may have been in the forefront for people, Maisha, I'm assuming for you, for example, maybe even before the pandemic, but the pandemic has accelerated a lot of these thoughts. One question I have for you guys in terms of something that I've heard a lot from students prior to the pandemic didn't start this at all, especially as underrepresented students, there's usually a question regarding location. So people are very concerned about where is that first job going to be? You know, where is it? I want to be in a city. I don't want to be in this particular location for many different reasons. And so my question to you all, how does that fit in terms of finding that first position? Is that something that really should have the priority that it often has in our community?
That I can definitely speak to that. But well, let me pause, since I don't know if Dr. Edmond wants to go, or Dr. Maisha, great
Yeah,
day.
go ahead.
So that's a very real issue at Google. Google has been very focused on the Bay Area. Traditionally, in terms of tech roles, Google has been focused on the Bay Area, with the one exception of a significant presence in New York City. And to be perfectly frank, I currently live in the Bay Area, and as a Black person, it's not bringing me the joy that I could get in certain other areas of the country. And this is a big conversation we have. There are other companies that are like Google as well. Apple is perhaps the most extreme, because Apple's not just about the Bay Area, but it's specifically focused on an area in the Bay Area, essentially the South Bay or Cupertino. Now, one of the things that happened at Google in the wake of George Floyd, they made a commitment to start expanding in areas where there was just naturally more Black talent. In fact, when I first joined, I said, hey, one of the best ways to get more Black people here is to go to cities and areas where Black people are and like to be. To be honest with you, when they made the announcement, I said, yeah, is this really going to work out? Is this just talk? The jury is still out. I will say that I just learned a couple of weeks ago that they're expanding the office in DC. They're creating a second office in DC. And they also are about to open a new office in Atlanta. And it does seem like they are sticking to their word. But I think this is really important. And to the extent that a given area allows you to, have, a better personal life and so forth, it can have an impact on how well you thrive. So I think that's a really important thing to think about.
Anybody else?
No, I think that I was still kind of stuck on the earlier point. And I think that I know a lot of focus has been on your performance at Request and Remote and how you're evaluated. I think the other side of that for me has been, what your personal growth. So in a sense of, going to a new company, being a new PhD, having other support staff, or trying to create that interaction between seniors, right? Senior engineers or senior leadership at that company. How do you learn from them, right? If you're in a position where you just want someone to hand you tasks and you're at home and you're coding and you're completing those tasks, you're doing your job, but are you in a position that you're actually growing and learning? Some of those serendipitous activities or interactions that you get with people happens naturally by being in the office. So how do you try to recreate those, in a remote kind of environment?
Mm-hmm. Dr. Gray Diggs, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think we're just going to be agreeing to disagree, right? Because I think I spend a lot of time, I just want the industry to change. So I think given what I do, I'm going to continue to push. And I think as a Bay Area native, I hear what Dr. Davis says a lot about the Bay Area, right? And I think it's interesting because from a location standpoint, I don't think it's rocket science that you're going to find more Black people in Atlanta than in the Bay Area. The cost of living, other societal factors. And I think all these companies have been moving and migrating. So we're going to have the same issue, right? You as a diverse talent will have options, but we will still run into the same issue that may not mean that Microsoft will get all the Black talent in Atlanta because you don't have that first mover advantage, right? There are going to be a number of big players in these areas. So I think Dr. Davis is right? You spend a lot of time in a place, you need to make sure that it's comfortable, right? I lived in Cincinnati for 11 years. Cincinnati was a really hard place. And for me, even though I was married at the time, it was a great place for kids. When I didn't have kids, it wasn't so, it was like, why am I here? Once I had kids, it was a great place. And then it got to a point where I wanted to be closer to home and I didn't want to drive 4 hours to go to a concert because Cincinnati didn't get all the concerts. I had to go to Chicago to get every single concert. And if depending on the season, you can't always make that drive. So I do think it's very easy when you're moving in that tax bracket and that money to make some sacrifices. But I think Dr. Davis has said to you all, and I would echo that, to be intentional, right? Like if you go in knowing I'm going to have more money and a lower cost of living, and I'm okay if I'm going to drive 4 hours to a concert, make that choice intentionally, right? But if you're expecting that Cincinnati is going to change, and
I hear
probably
that.
won't, right? Like Cincinnati will never be Chicago. It ain't even Louisville. It's
That's good. What about this idea, you guys? Let's pivot to the small firm versus the big firm. You'll hear people focus, and I even think Dr. Davis said something about working for startup initially. But is it true that you're going to have a lot more security at a larger institution?
That's a good question. So I think for me, I would say, well, first I want to address Brad's question. I think yes is a short answer. Like if you want to start at a company and then work your way to remote, I think that's perfectly a good approach. But so for us, we're a large company, but we also work with startups sometimes, and so I have some level of visibility from that. And so some of the startups, they do offer remote, work in some cases. I don't. Some of the startups we work with have since closed or shut down, disbanded, and I'm talking to some of the people that I've worked with. Some cases they move to another startup. And that's I won't say it's a lifestyle, but that's a process that they've done in jumping from startup to startup. I think for me personally, I think the bigger company right now is comfortable for me. It gives me that flexibility to do more in terms of research and ideas and being able to fund. At Southwest Research, we're a lot more diverse in the technologies that we do, and that kind of works with my personality versus having a startup and pretty driven and focused on building that startup on one central idea or one central product or something like that. It doesn't, I need more flexibility. Right now, I may work from 2 to 3 completely different projects at a time, but it works for me. So I think you kind of have that mindset of your personality and your working style and how you want to grow from a research standpoint. Do I just go to a startup? Because I've heard of some people trying to go to a startup in hopes that it grows and gets bought out, and you hear the tales of someone getting pretty rich by being in a startup early. That also is there as well. But yeah, I think you just got to make your decision with a lot of things to say, okay, how long do I see myself being here, or where do I see the growth in this startup versus going to a much larger company?
Yeah.
I think this is a tough one, right, Carl? Because I think a lot of times students want to be told what to do. And I think that's the difference between undergrad and graduate school. I think when you're moving and you're going into that PhD, it's like, here are the options. We get so used to, like, in undergrad, here's your course guide. You need to do A, B, C, D, E to graduate this many units. And I hate to sound like I'm being really tough on you all, but this is where the adulting starts, right? Like, you're probably like, graduate school, I am adulting. Yeah, you're adulting with the safety net, because it's still kind of determined. You need to take your qualifying exams, you need to do this. There's still these gates. And once you get out, like you then become the navigator of your future, and you have lots and lots of options, right? Like startups are options, big firm, small firm. And it goes back to that intentionality. And I think the struggle I always see with graduate students, especially, is that they want to still kind of want to be told what to do. You have to drive that process for yourself. I know that's probably like the worst answer to hear, like, but it is like, if you want to go to a big firm, okay, well, what kind of big firm, right? Because there's tech, there's consumer product goods, depending on your background, it opens up, do you want to be at a startup? Do you want to be an entrepreneur? Do you want to go start your own thing, right? Because we know that Facebook and all these other places got started by grad school dropouts. They got with their friends. And again, that's why we get this bro culture, of what these companies look like. And so I hate to say, I can't give you the roadmap. What I think that Dr. Moore and your advisors and others can do is give you resources, but I think sometimes your advisors aren't even equipped to help you, because many of them didn't go to industry, right? Like Carl, you left Northwestern and you were at Ford. You had done internships at Ford, so you had an extensive network in the auto industry as a mechanical engineering PhD. Graduate students don't always have that. And then you're looking for your advisor to advise, but they've never walked that path. Like my advisor literally defended his dissertation at Wisconsin, and then drove the next day to Minnesota to be a postdoc. And then he drove from there to Northwestern to be a professor. While he's collaborated with industry, he has no idea, like he leans on his old graduate students to help his current graduate students. And so I would just say, use the resources, former people in your group, right. Advisors who are professors like Carl that have networks outside. Ask for help. I see it all the time on LinkedIn where students are like, I don't know how to do, I want to do blah. People are very willing to help.
Yeah, yes, they are.
Yeah.
Hey, John, I want to, since we're running out of time, I'm going to switch the question just a little bit for you.
Sure.
When you were mentioning your path, right, and the number of companies you've been affiliated with and worked for, it really brings up this idea that gone are the days where someone joins a company and then retires from that same company, right? So can you say something about that in terms of using that process to move forward?
Yeah, I would say, this idea of, I didn't know your dad worked at IBM, but there was a day where IBMers were lifers. I think, so in my case, I was at IBM 7 years, ran 7 years, and it's been Google 3 years. Definitely, I think moving around is something that's accepted. I do think you don't want to be, I remember looking at an interview candidate who 6 months at this company, 8 months at that company, and had done a string of 5 times switching in less than a year. I think that would be kind of excessive. But I think, you need to constantly be out there kind of putting your resume out to make sure that you are not missing out on other good opportunities, to make sure that you have the compensation you want. And I think, frankly, you should be very conscious of when you've gotten to a point where you've kind of gotten everything that you probably could get out of this particular position. I think that's true in a lot of different ways, whether or not it's you've finished a big project, you've published a significant trove of papers, and whatever that milestone is, be thinking about that milestone as you first arrive to a place. And then once you've gotten that milestone, okay, does that mean maybe there should be an internal transfer, or maybe there should be a transfer to another company? I think, just to piggyback on what Dr. Gray Diggs just said, and we've all kind of been saying, is you need to be intentional and you need to design this. Really think about, what it is you want and how you want to get there. One thing I'll quote, Google has this saying, respect the opportunity. And if you are finishing with a PhD, you have a big opportunity. You want to leverage that. and really take advantage of what can you do with that opportunity. So be very thoughtful. And I'll just add one more thing, kind of going back to the startups comment. I heard some advice from a person who is 40 years old and retired. So I think there's a little bit of value in this person saying this. They said that if you're thinking about a startup, you want to latch on to a company that has between about 200 to 1,000 employees. That kind of is moving up. I heard a podcaster have different numbers. This podcaster suggested if you're thinking about a startup, you want to make sure you've kind of hit about 70 employees. The point they were making is not that you don't ever want to do a smaller startup. You may want to found your own company. I tried founding my own company, you know, on the quiet tip, I might try it again. But once you get to a certain level of growth, there's a whole bunch of risk that is reduced. The 200 employee point, you usually have a certain amount of funding, but yet you're still early enough where there's a lot of opportunity with that equity, right? Whereas if it's 5,000 people, 10,000 people, the upside is not as big. So anyway, that was something that when I heard it, I thought, oh, well, that's an interesting way to look at it. Like have those numbers in your head.
Right. Thank you very much. You know, as always, when you have a great discussion, time flies, and you guys brought a wealth of knowledge, and it just, I mean, I have more questions on board, but I don't think we can do justice to any of them in the little bit of time that we have remaining. I do want to take, by some people's watches, we may have a minute left. Is there anyone that has a question to take us out? Just opening it up just in case we have a student question. Okay, I don't see anyone asking. So any panel member want something on your mind that you've been meaning to say, you want to throw out there as we close?
I'll just say one quick thing about negotiation, because I think Brianna also asked to follow up on that. And again, I think this echoes what you said, Maisha. You want to talk to people and you want to talk in detail. Like, find your set of folks that are like at these other companies, and you want to hear like, okay, what was your base? What was, you know, what stock options did you exist? Because there is a wide range of what people get. Two people come into an entry position and one person can have double the amount of equity, the amount of stock that the other person has. So talk to your people in detail and find out what they're getting so that you can be more informed when you go to that negotiation table.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Dr. Du Pont, Dr. Gray Diggs, anything? Any final words?
No final word. I would just say, you know, I'm available. You know, Dr. Moore has my information. If you guys have any other follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to me. I will try to get back to you as soon as I can.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Gray Diggs.
I'm just excited for you all because I don't think that my advisor curated anything like this for us. Yeah. So, you know, Dr. Moore has all the connections. You need to squeeze him like a lemon for everything he has before you move. So don't be afraid to ask and continue to tap into his and others' networks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. And thank you, students, for participating. And it will be on YouTube. So I'll send out a link to let everybody know. But thank you, panelists. I really appreciate it. Bye, everybody.
All right, bye.